Thank you, Monsieur. We already concur that God created us to cooperate with His all-embracing presence in making this world a world filled with cooperation, love, truth, and justice. It gives me a great pleasure. It is also a moment of reverence to be able to be here. Only 2 days ago, the Jewish people started the new Jewish year, 5779. And so I am now here to bless you with a new year. May a new year come where food safety will be reserved and preserved. And when I ask myself, what place would I choose to be immediately starting this new year? There is no best place, no better place than to be here. Here with my brother, Tahoturi, and here with the Monsignor, we already express this extraordinary revolution that takes place in our time. It's a quiet revolution, but it's a revolution that people from different faiths finally come to the conclusion that we desperately need each other to realize the common goal of justice and peace. And that opens such tremendous opportunities. To be here is also always a memory. My wife here and I were in 43. We were wood plucked from fire. The first person who saved my life, a 3-month-old infant, was a SS officer who suddenly felt compassion. And the others were my foster father and mother, Ria and Bertus, devoutly Catholic, who risked their life. My foster father gave his life because it was in command, not told by people to him, neither by cardinals or bishops, but in their own heart, the interpretation of faith. So the door was opened for me. And the responsibility is so strong. But I feel in this room, in the last few days where I was privileged to be part of your searches, of your life work, that this room is filled with compassion. God in Jewish faith is called Rav Chesed Ve'emet, a God first of love and then of truth. And the commentary says that God wanted the world to establish with truth, but the world couldn't cope with it, and it was falling asunder. But then he introduced, as it were, love and compassion first. And you know, when you are with all your heart like you do, differences of opinion, business people and people from research, people from NGOs, and people from the different spheres, there is a trust that is built between us. And when we have compassion, we can face the truth and share the truth. I am so hopeful because in the course of the last few years, this quiet revolution has developed. You know, in 2000, there was the announcement, the incredible announcement of the Millennium Development Goals for 15 years. I have asked some of the ministers who were at the meeting, who said that it would be 15 years? Nobody knows. But it was the acceleration of our hope. And at the same time, people came together, I was one of them, to try to formulate an Earth Charter, to recognize that this was an important moment in Earth history. And I just quote some of those sentences engraved in my heart, which echo some of the sentiments that were said in these 2 days. We must recognize that in the midst of this magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family, one Earth community with a common destiny. The protection of the vitality and diversity and beauty of this planet is a sacred trust. The choice is ours to form a global partnership, to take care of the earth and ourselves, or to risk the destruction of ourselves and the diversity of life. We must realize that when basic needs have been met, human development is more about being more than having more. These expressions of research and cooperation echo these feelings, and they are part of our spiritual traditions which go beyond the structures of religion, but touch this spiritual sense and core in our heart. And so I was here in 2004 in this room, and we had a meeting on water, conflict resolution, and spiritual transformation. Imagine the words coming together, and there were lots of tensions in the room. But there I met the Jordanian former Minister of Agriculture and of Water. And I can tell you that the seeds were planted for something that is called now eco-peace, and brings together Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians to revitalize the River Jordan and to try to work in cooperation for water. It's one of the signs in hope in the whole Middle East. You know, in 2005 and 2009, we started with the Charter of Compassion. And for those of us who understand the challenge of our scriptures, it's so important to remember the central sentence. We must remember that any interpretation of Scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate. It is an opening of the possibilities which were taken. In 2013, I was part of a group that started JIVA, Global Interfaith Wash Alliance. I never would thought before that I would stand with Puchi Swami and Muslim brothers and sisters in Rishikesh and inaugurate a block of toilets. But it was one of the moving moments of life. And this spreading all over India. And there are a sustainability of that. In 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals. It has been said here, it's very difficult to make a pronouncement about the future and to say we have goals to be reached. But we as human beings were able to plan the Millennium Development Goals for 15 years, and we are not disappointed. And now we have taken the responsibility for the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be when realized, make an end to acute poverty and the beginning of the realization of the Accord of Paris on climate change. You and I are part of this, and I'm reflecting. In the end of the last century, the churches and synagogues and mosques came together and asked the G8 to put an end to the debt that was on the bodies and the shoulders of people in the developing countries because of history. And the G8 responded in the positive. I would plead with my brothers and sisters in the different spiritual traditions to take the audacity and to declare this decade that is coming before us, the decade between 2020 and 2030, as a sacred time, as the moment of Kairos, as Jubilee year, the same Jubilee period year that convinced the G8, may convince the G20 and all other meetings of politicians. And let me say one plea. No meeting should be a meeting without also the spiritual element. Religious leadership has been slow. I have been slow. But we are coming to the realization. And so for the G20 last year, we from the religions put two policy briefs on immigration, in which we said at the end, G20 summit should acknowledge religious engagement in the resettlement process, specifically in European Union countries and the US and Canada, and commit to drawing on these experiences to inform national policies and to advise intergovernmental entities. We came with a brief on world hunger. And we said at the end, success towards the objective of relieving famine requires full engagement of religious leaders at senior levels in highlighting the ethical issues at stake in the famine emergency, building on the teachings of religious traditions individually and collectively, specific engagement of religious leaders in efforts to negotiate access to areas acutely affected by famine, and cooperative peacemaking efforts with religious communities in famine-affected areas. Those two policy briefs were on the table of the G20. They did not change so much, but was the beginning. And I would suggest that also from our religious communities, there will be a brief on the security and the safety of food. You know, in this Earth Charter, there was the combination of respect and care for the community and life, the integrity of ecology, the social economic rights, peace, non-violence, and democracy. I'm here because the door was open to me. Let us together keep the door wide open in this miraculous opportunity that is given to us to realize, in my words, to realize God's prayer by our deeds of justice and compassion. And I end with the words from the Earth Charter. Let ours be a time remembered for a new reverence for life, the achieving of sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and a joyful celebration of life.